War of the Worlds. The War of the Worlds.
Okay, so firstly, let me say hi. This is your PM. You might know him as Lord Mayor of London of one time. This is your man, Boris. I thought while I'm convalescing, let me be absolutely clear. I've got a clean bill of health and I'm feeling much, much better. We can beat this. We can flatten the curve. And I thought I'd give you some outreach work to support the key workers at this time and actually deliver one of the chapter podcasts for Mr. Dawson, who I know is working extremely hard, as all key workers are, to deliver that outstanding level of education. So I'm going to take you through chapter 15, and let me be absolutely clear, this is a phenomenal text, and it's an absolute privilege to be working through this with you at this time. So let's get started with chapter 15. What had happened in Surrey?
15. What had happened in Surrey? It was while the curate had sat and talked so wildly to me, under the hedge in the flat meadows near Halliford, and while my brother was watching the fugitives stream over Westminster Bridge, that the Martians had resumed the offensive. So far as one can ascertain from the conflicting accounts that have been put forth, the majority of them remained busied with preparations in the Horsell pit until 9 that night, hurrying on some operation that disengaged huge volumes of green smoke.
Okay, so a narrative, a structural technique here, which is reminding the reader at this time that this was being written from a future perspective. He mentions, as you can quite clearly see, let me just here we go. So far as one can ascertain from the conflicting accounts that have been put forth, well, of course, that means that by the time this has been written, he's had time to reflect, and that has had an impact on the way in which this narrative has been written. So we're reminded that it feels much more realistic because of the way in which it has been written, and that future, well, is it future? Is it present? Is it past? I mean, who's to say? Let's have a look. It's past tense, but it reminds the reader that it's been written from a future perspective, from the one in which we are reading now, if that makes any sense at all. I do hope it does.
But 3 certainly came out about 8 o'clock, and advancing slowly and cautiously, made their way through Byfleet and Pireford towards Ripley and Weybridge, and so came in sight of the expectant batteries against the setting sun. These Martians did not advance in a body, but in a line, each perhaps a mile and a half from his nearest fellow. They communicated with one another by means of siren-like howls, running up and down the scale from one note to another.
So a couple of very quick points here. Firstly, you've got the proper nouns of Byfleet and Pireford, Ripley, Weybridge, and these, of course, are designed to give that sense of authenticity to the narrative, and it does that very well. These are picking out these points in southwest London, in Surrey, not big places by any means. They're small villages, but they're very, very important to the people who live there and important to the sense of London community. And I should know, having been, of course, Lord Mayor for so many years. And then further down, we've got the use of sound, the use of senses here to describe the sound, the siren-like howls of these Martians running up and down the scale from one note to another. So you've got that sense of it's an unnatural sort of sound being described in quite scientific terms, which makes it, of course, all the more realistic. So there's the language of science there, up and down the scales. It has a musicality to it, but it's unfamiliar and it's frightening to the reader, and very much to me as I convalesce here at Chequers, and it's almost too much to read.
It was this howling and the firing of the guns at Ripley and St. George's Hill that we had heard at Upper Halliford. The Ripley gunners, unseasoned artillery volunteers, who ought never to have been placed in such a position, fired one wild, premature, ineffectual volley and bolted, on horse and foot, through the deserted village, while the Martian, without using his heat ray, walked serenely over their guns, stepped gingerly among them, passed in front of them, and so came unexpectedly upon the guns in Painshill Park, which he destroyed.
Okay, so we've got more proper nouns here. The St George's Hill, the Upper Halliford, even the Ripley Gunners are mentioned there. Good old Ripley Gunners there. I remember them well. So we've got and Painshill Park at the end of that paragraph as well. So what we have here, as you'll no doubt know, I'm sure Mr. Dawson has tutored you very very effectively in language and structural feature spotting, and here we have an asyndetic list of ways in which the Martians progress. Towards the end of that paragraph, we've got while the Martian, without using the heat ray, walked serenely over their guns, stepped gingerly among them, passed in front of them, and so came unexpectedly upon the guns in Painshill Park, which he did indeed sadly did destroy, which is a real shame. So what we have there is an asyndetic list. It suggests the ease and the speed with which the Martian could indeed move, and the ineffectual nature of our arms against them, our weapons against them there with the artillery. So a structural technique there of asyndeton or an asyndetic list. And I think there's perhaps a little bit of confusion. So let me be absolutely clear at this point that it should be referred to as an asyndetic list. Now, I mean, let me be absolutely clear. The exam boards will not penalise if you call it a syndetic list, but really it's an asyndetic list. So that's the technical term. It's an asyndetic list. So it is an asyndetic list. I hope that's absolutely clear. And it's a structural technique used to reinforce, in this case, the ease with which the Martians could move and indeed destroy the artillery there of the poor old Ripley gunners.
The St George's Hill men, however, were better led, or of better metal. Hidden by a pine wood as they were, they seem to have been quite unsuspected by the Martian nearest to them. They laid their guns as deliberately as if they had been on parade, and fired at about 1,000 yards range. The shells flashed all around him, and he was seen to advance a few paces, stagger, and go down. Everybody yelled together, and the guns were reloaded in frantic haste. The overthrown Martian set up a prolonged ululation, and immediately a second glittering giant answering him appeared over the trees to the south. It would seem that a leg of the tripod had been smashed by one of the shells. The whole of the second volley flew wide of the Martian on the ground, and, simultaneously, both his companions brought their heat rays to bear on the battery. The ammunition blew up. The pine trees all about the guns flashed into fire, and only one or two of the men, who were already running over the crest of the hill, escaped.
So, as we well know at this time, it's very important to keep hope and optimism. And here, this very pivotal point in the book, if you hold the book, we're on page 85, and if you hold it, it's very, very central to the novel. And I think that's so important to remind ourselves of that fact, that this is a pivotal moment in the novel. It's structurally central, it's thematically central too as well. So worth just being aware of that fact. And here there is a real sense of the fact that the artillery may well succeed. They may well win against the Martians. A reader reading this for the first time, and particularly in a serialized form, as it indeed first was published in 1898 in a magazine form with chapters being published each week. And at this point, it's what we'd call a cliffhanger section, because of course there does seem to be some success against the Martians, so there is a real sense of hope and a sense of optimism there. But of course we know that is sadly short-lived. But for now, they have brought down another one of the Martians So there does seem to be an advantage there to the gunners and the artillery in Surrey.
After this, it would seem that the three took counsel together and halted, and the scouts who were watching them report that they remained absolutely stationary for the next half hour. The Martian who had been overthrown crawled tediously out of his hood, a small brown figure, oddly suggestive from that distance of a speck of blight, and apparently engaged in the repair of his support. About 9 he had finished, for his cowl was then seen above the trees again. It was a few minutes past 9 that night when these 3 sentinels were joined by 4 other Martians, each carrying a thick black tube. A similar tube was handed to each of the 3, and the 7 proceeded to distribute themselves at equal distances along a curved line between St. George's Hill, Weybridge, and the village of Send, southwest of Ripley. A dozen rockets sprang out of the hills before them so soon as they began to move, and warned the waiting batteries about Ditton and Esher. At the same time, 4 of their fighting machines, similarly armed with tubes, crossed the river, and 2 of them, black against the western sky, came into sight of myself and the curate as we hurried wearily and painfully along the road that runs northward out of Halliford. They moved, as it seemed to us, upon a cloud, for a milky mist covered the fields and rose to 1/3 of their height. At this sight the curate cried faintly in his throat and began running. But I knew it was no good running from a Martian, and I turned aside and crawled through dewy nettles and brambles into the broad ditch by the side of the road. He looked back, saw what I was doing, and turned to join me.
So this is more in terms of characterization here. The curate is being described and characterized really as being very, very ineffective, and clearly here he thinks that running is the only option, and of course he shouldn't. He should stay at home. He should save the NH. Oh no, sorry. He should stay where he is and hide in, as indeed the narrator's doing, in the ditch. So he's another. He's a foil in structural terms. Let me be absolutely clear here. In structural terms, he is a foil to the narrator. He allows the reader to root for the narrator in a much clearer sense, because the narrator has more common sense than the curate does, and we sort of see the curate as a laughable character, a bit silly, a little bit naive, and a bit ineffective, really a bit pathetic, whereas the narrator we see as having a bit more of a chance of survival. So he's a character foil, I should say, which heightens our appreciation and let it be clear, admiration of the narrator at this unprecedented time.
The 2 halted, the nearer to us standing and facing Sunbury, the remoter being a grey indistinctness towards the evening star, away towards Staines. The occasional howling of the Martians had ceased. They took up their positions in the huge crescent about their cylinders in absolute silence. It was a crescent with 12 miles between its horns. Never since the devising of gunpowder was the beginning of a battle so still. To us and to an observer about Ripley, it would have had precisely the same effect. The Martians seemed in solitary possession of the darkling night, lit only as it was by the slender moon, the stars, the afterglow of the daylight, and the ruddy glare from St. George's Hill and the woods of Painshill. But facing that crescent everywhere, at Staines, Hounslow, Ditton, Esher, Ockham, behind hills and woods, south of the river, and across the flat grass meadows to the north of it, wherever a cluster of trees or village houses gave sufficient cover, the guns were waiting. The signal rockets burst and rained their sparks through the night and vanished, and the spirit of all those watching batteries rose to a tense expectation. The Martians had but to advance into the line of fire, and instantly those motionless black forms of men, those guns glittering so darkly in the early night, would explode into a thunderous fury of battle.
Sorry, I just dropped my pencil there. Again, just structurally here, right in the centre of the novel, a real sense of hope, a real sense of optimism. We've got a few things happening in this paragraph here, starting with the proper nouns: Staines, Hounslow, Ditton, Esher. I always thought it was Esher, but anyway, Ockham, and so giving that sense of authenticity. This is the range with which the Martians do indeed have. And then, of course, the figurative language just further down there. So we've had the proper nouns, and now we're moving into the figurative language of metaphors. The signal rockets burst and rained their sparks through the night and vanished. So rained their sparks through the night is very, very figurative. It's what we call metaphorical, and I'm sure Mr. Dawson has explained to you. It creates that really quite dramatic effect there in that case. It suggests, I think at this point, it gives a real sense of power for the artillery. It's a real sense of hope that actually they have the means to flatten the curve, to destroy the Martians, and but of course they actually don't. But at this point, it feels like they have the power, they have the artillery expertise, the wherewithal to destroy these Martians, and then. Just moving down a little further, the Martians had but to advance into the line of fire, and instantly those motionless black forms of men, those guns glittering so darkly in the early night, would explode into a thunderous fury of battle. Now, we've got a few things happening here, haven't we? So we've got the guns glittering. There's the alliteration there of guns glittering. It's also, it may be figurative, it may be a metaphor, maybe they are glittering in the moonlight. Maybe it's hyperbolic, it's an exaggeration, so that's a language point if you wish to write that down. It's hyperbolic, hyperbolic, and it comes from that word hyperbole, which means exaggeration from the ancient Greeks. So here we have that. It gives that sense that the guns are superior, and they're able to indeed defeat the Martians. And then, of course, they will explode, which is again another example, really, of hyperbole. Although I suppose technically they do explode, but I think I'll still go for that hyperbole, into a thunderous fury of battle. Well, that's a metaphor again, isn't it? And interesting, it's drawing on the same semantic field of weather. So we've had raining down, and now we have thunderous fury. So I would link, perhaps even with a little arrow from one to the next there, linking those two together, a semantic field of weather and stormy weather particularly. And you could even bring in the effect of pathetic fallacy there. So if this comes up in the exam, you are really in safe hands there. The fury of battle. So this is a really tense moment, as I've mentioned before many times. It's structurally the center point of the book. It's the turning point, and it feels like the British artillery have a good old chance of defeating these brutes.
No doubt the thought that was uppermost in 1,000 of those vigilant minds, even as it was uppermost in mine, was the riddle: how much they understood of us. Did they grasp that we in our millions were organized, disciplined, working together? Or did they interpret our spurts of fire, the sudden stinging of our shells, our steady investment of their encampment, as we should the furious unanimity of onslaught in a disturbed hive of bees?
So we can't fail to imagine or pick up on certainly the animal imagery there, the simile there of as we should the furious unanimity of onslaught in a disturbed hive of bees. So this is again changing that perspective, trying to empathise with how the Martians would view us as nothing more than disturbed bees from a beehive. I do apologise for the strange noise in the previous little snippets of audio. I just realised there was something causing a little bit of hum there. I'm afraid I've not got my technical advisors here at Checkers with me, so it's just me in a room into a microphone, and I apologise for that. But I've hopefully got that a little bit better for you, and hopefully you can move forward with that.
Did they dream they might exterminate us? At that time, no one knew what food they needed.
Sorry to pause again there, but again, this is another structural technique this time. That reminder in parentheses there of the fact that at that time no one knew what food they needed at that critical time. So this is reminding us that, of course, now when the narrative was written, more clarity is present and is given. But at the time this was happening, they didn't know. So this is foreshadowing, isn't it? The fact that the Martians do, spoiler alert, that they do use the humans for food. So that's foreshadowing again, that creating of tension without saying as much, but it gives that sense of tension that at that time no one knew what food they needed, but the clues are there, aren't they? That actually they wouldn't exterminate the people because, of course, they needed to essentially devour them. Pretty horrific.
100 such questions struggled together in my mind as I watched that vast sentinel's shape. And in the back of my mind was the sense of all the huge unknown and hidden forces Londonward. Had they prepared pitfalls? Were the powder mills at Hounslow ready as a snare? Would the Londoners have the heart and courage to make a greater Moscow of their mighty province of houses?
So a little bit of background here, just to give you some context here. Well, two things really. We've got the regular questionings. These are rhetorical questions, aren't they? You'll have spotted these. That's a structural technique, and you could refer to them as interrogatives. That's the technical term for questions. That's interrogatives or interrogatives, if you prefer that sort of pronunciation. But interrogatives. But you could also refer to them as rhetorical questions. These are questions that the reader will, of course, have, but the narrator is asking those questions, and that therefore makes the reader ask the same questions. And we wonder at this very tense climactic time whether or not, of course, the preparations have been made to defeat these Martians, and it's hanging in the balance. It really is at this point. It could go either way. Now, just a little bit of background on the Greater Moscow there, that reference, and you may well have looked at the in the appendices there at the back to check those, and I really do recommend that you do so for all of the footnotes there. But this one in particular is of note. It refers to a battle that the Napoleonic army had with Russia, and what Moscow did was set fire to huge parts of its city in a way to push back the French invasion. So the question here is, will the Londoners set fire to their houses, create fire to push back the Martian invasion? Will they have the courage to do that? And the answer, of course, is no. They don't do that.
Then, after an interminable time, as it seemed to us, crouching and peering through the hedge, came a sound like the distant concussion of a gun. Another nearer, and then another. And then the Martian beside us raised his tube on high and discharged it, gunwise, with a heavy report that made the ground heave. The one towards Staines answered him. There was no flash, no smoke, simply that loaded detonation. I was so excited by these heavy minute guns following one another that I so far forgot my personal safety and my scalded hands as to clamber up into the hedge and stare towards Sunbury. As I did so, a second report followed, and a big projectile hurled overhead towards Hounslow. I expected at least to see smoke or fire, or some such evidence of its work. but all I saw was the deep blue sky above, with one solitary star and the white mist spreading wide and low beneath. And there had been no crash, no answering explosion. The silence was restored, and the minute lengthened to 3. "What's happened?" said the curate, standing up beside me. "Heaven knows," said I.
So more characterization here in the sense of the curate. When he does ask, when he does speak, rather he tends to ask questions and rather open-ended, very bland, helpless, pathetic sort of questions. Really, what has happened? Said the curate, reinforcing that sense of ignorance that he has. As a foil to the narrator, who he looks to for a source of intelligence and a source of understanding and information. So that's a structural point because it's referring to character and characterization of the curate, but also, in a sense, the characterization of the narrator too.
A bat flickered by and vanished. A distant tumult of shouting began and ceased. I looked again at the Martian and saw he was now moving eastward along the riverbank with a swift, rolling motion. Every moment I expected the fire of some hidden battery to spring upon him, but the evening calm was unbroken. The figure of the Martian grew smaller as he receded, and presently the mist and the gathering night had swallowed him up. By a common impulse, we clambered higher. Towards Sunbury was a dark appearance, as though a conical hill had suddenly come into being there, hiding our view of the further country. And then, remoter, across the river, over Walton, we saw another such summit. These hill-like forms grew lower and broader, even as we stared.
Absolutely right. Lower and broader, much like flattening the curve, push it down lower and indeed broader. So that's what we have there. A little bit of hendiadys, I guess, if you wanted to be particularly specific there. The language technique of hendiadys there, lower and broader, but it's hardly worth really bothering about. It just reminded me of the current crisis at this time.
Moved by a sudden thought, I looked northward, and there I perceived a third of these cloudy black copies had arisen. Everything had suddenly become very still. Far away to the southeast, marking the quiet, we heard the Martians hooting to one another. And then the air quivered again with the distant thud of their guns. But the earthly artillery made no reply. Now, at the time, we could not understand these things.
Again, they're just reinforcing the sense that the narrative has been written at a later date. At the time, we had no sense of these things. So we couldn't understand these things, but later I was to learn the meaning of these ominous copies that gathered in the twilight. So this is a sense that at the time they didn't know, but of course as time progressed and by the time the narrative was written, they did know because events had happened. Now this is a very much a structural technique which gives the narrative a much more greater sense of realism. It feels like a non-fiction text, and it gives it that sense of authenticity, which is what H.G. Wells clearly was going for at that time to create that very convincing and frightening novel. So you can see there how the structure is being used by Wells for that effect.
But later I was to learn the meaning of these ominous copies that gathered in the twilight. Each of the Martians, standing in the great crescent I have described, had discharged, by means of the gun-like tube he carried, a huge canister over whatever hill, copse, cluster of houses, or other possible cover for guns chanced to be in front of him. Some fired only one of these, some two, as in the case of the one we had seen, The one at Ripley is said to have discharged no fewer than 5 at that time. These canisters smashed on striking the ground. They did not explode, and incontinently disengaged an enormous volume of heavy, inky vapor, coiling and pouring upward in a huge and ebony cumulus cloud, a gaseous hill that sank and spread itself slowly over the surrounding country. And the touch of that vapor, the inhaling of its pungent wisps, was death to all that breathes.
So this is the reference to the black smoke, the toxic gas, which interestingly H.G. Wells does indeed prophetically predict the use of toxic gas, which, as we know, happened in World War One, not too much later than this novel, only about 20 years. Well, no, not even 20 years after this. About 16 years later, I suppose. And here we have some personification, so language there of the touch of that vapour. The very touch suggests that the vapour is sort of reaching out, has a human quality, and is reaching out to the people of Surrey. And when they inhale the wisps, they sadly die. So you've got the personification there of the toxic gas, the vapour. And you've also got the reference to the pungent wisps, which is referring to the sense of smell. So it's what we call sensory imagery, and I would refer to it as olfactory, because it's referring to a sense of smell, which is known as an olfactory sense. That's OLFACTORY. So the word factory with the letters OL before it, and that just simply means the sense of smell, and that's what we have here. It puts the reader very much in mind of what's happening. It immerses the reader very much into the narrative.
It was heavy, this vapour, heavier than the densest smoke, so that, after the first tumultuous uprush and outflow of its impact, it sank down through the air and poured over the ground in a manner rather liquid than gaseous, abandoning the hills and streaming into the valleys and ditches and watercourses, even, as I have heard, the carbonic acid gas that pours from volcanic clefts is wont to do.
So you'll have spotted here that Wells is using that scientific lexis to impress the reader and give a sense of scientific authenticity to the novel, making it sound less fictional, more non-fiction, referring to words like liquid and gaseous, and then of course we have the carbonic acid gas from volcanic clefts. So we've got the geology and the scientific lexis there, adding to that sense of authenticity and realism, making this sound like it is absolutely true.
And where it came upon water, some chemical action occurred, and the surface would be instantly covered with a powdery scum that sank slowly and made way for more. The scum was absolutely insoluble, and it is a strange thing, seeing the instant effect of the gas, that one could drink, without hurt, the water from which it had been strained. The vapour did not diffuse as a true gas would do. It hung together in banks, flowing sluggishly down the slope of the land.
If I may just talk over this a little bit, this is all scientific lexis, all adding to that sense of authenticity. So just apply that to this whole section, really, up to the end of this paragraph.
In the form of dust. Save that an unknown element giving a group of 4 lines in the blue of the spectrum is concerned, we are still entirely ignorant of the nature of this substance.
And again, that structural technique of perspective being used, we are still entirely ignorant of the nature of this substance. Even now, when the book is being written, it gives it a sense that this has already happened. It's using that perspective and that tense. That's using the present tense there. We are still entirely ignorant. So the present tense there is being used very, very effectively from Wells, or by Wells, I should say, to give that sense that that this is still not being clarified by scientists. So it's giving that sense of inevitability, but also a sense of the fact that this is non-fiction, this is real, and this has really happened.
Once the tumultuous upheaval of its dispersion was over, the black smoke clung so closely to the ground, even before its precipitation, that 50 feet up in the air, on the roofs and upper stories of high houses and on great trees, there was a chance of escaping its poison altogether, as was proved even that night at Street Cobham and Ditton. The man who escaped at the former place tells a wonderful story of the strangeness of its coiling flow, and how he looked down from the church spire and saw the houses of the village rising like ghosts out of its inky nothingness.
It wouldn't be right to let that slip by, that little simile there, rising like ghosts out of its inky nothingness there. Interesting use there of that particular vehicle in a simile. I don't know if Mr. Dawson has explained to you the difference or how a simile operates, but as far as I understand it from my advisors, that a simile has two aspects. It has the tenor, tenor, and that's the thing that's been described, which of course in this case is the houses themselves, and then you have the vehicle, which is the thing that the tenor is being compared to, and here they're being compared to in fact ghosts. And what that does is it's an interesting choice of vehicle, because of course it's referring to something from beyond the grave. It has a sense of mortality, a sense of death, which I think is particularly poignant at this point in the book, when the Martians are on the move and are destroying so many people in the London area.
For a day and a half he remained there, weary, starving, and sun-scorched, the earth under the blue sky and against the prospect of the distant hills, a velvet black expanse, with red roofs, green trees, and later black-veiled shrubs and gates, barns, outhouses, and walls, rising here and there into the sunlight.
And what this does here, of course, you'll have spotted the asyndetic list there of all the facets of which the black smoke has indeed covered. So you have the distant hills, a velvet black expanse with red roofs, green trees, and black veiled shrubs and gates, barns, outhouses, and walls. So indeed, the whole of the area has been covered by the black smoke. It's overwhelming. And that asyndetic list there does indeed emphasise how overwhelming the black smoke it is.
But that was at Street Cobham, where the black vapour was allowed to remain until it sank of its own accord into the ground. As a rule, the Martians, when it had served its purpose, cleared the air of it again by wading into it and directing a jet of steam upon it. This they did with the vapour banks near us, as we saw in the starlight from the window of the deserted house at Upper Halliford, whither we had returned. From there we could see the searchlights on Richmond Hill and Kingston Hill, going to and fro, and at about 11 the windows rattled, and we heard the sound of the huge siege guns that had been put in position there. These continued intermittently for the space of a quarter of an hour, sending chance shots at the invisible Martians at Hampton and Ditton. And then the pale beams of the electric light vanished and were replaced by a bright red glow. Then the fourth cylinder fell, a brilliant green meteor, as I learned afterwards, in Bushy Park.
Bushy Park. Incrementum, structurally incrementum here. The fourth cylinder fell, where we're counting up in numerical value here. Incrementally, these cylinders are indeed falling, which gives a greater sense of dread, a greater sense of power to the Martians. And then he reveals also a structural point is the perspective, as I learned afterwards. So he didn't realise at the time, but he's realised since afterwards. Well, of course, this is all being created, it's all a construct, it's all a narrative, it's all fiction. But H.G. Wells is making it feel like it's non-fiction by suggesting that the narrator learnt more things than he did at the time. So we're giving that sense of perspective there as well. So using tense and perspective is a structural technique, very powerful, and we've seen it being used over and over again in this chapter and elsewhere in the novel too.
Before the guns on the Richmond and Kingston line of hills began, there was a fitful cannonade far away in the southwest, due, I believe, to guns being fired haphazard before the black vapour could overwhelm the gunners. So, setting about it as methodically as men might smoke out a wasp's nest, the Martians spread this strange, stifling vapour over the Londonward country.
And again, Wells is reducing humanity down to the bestial level, down to animal level. Here, describing humans as indeed wasps being destroyed with smoke in a wasp's nest. So, making humanity seem very small, very vulnerable, and I think that's well worth applying back to the irony at the time this was written, and that the huge importance of the British Empire, that the huge inflated sense of importance that the British people had at that time, and here Wells is going against that and actually portraying Britons as simply just irritated wasps in a nest. We've had bees in a hive, and now we have wasps in a nest, and we've seen that all the way through. It's one of H.G. Wells's tropes. That's tropes, tropes, and that means one of the things he does over and over again, one of his techniques, his little tricks that he uses, and here this is one of them, and there are many of them, and it's well worth gathering these together when you are revising this for the exam, to pull together all these examples of where he is describing humanity in such base terms.
The horns of the crescent slowly moved apart, until, at last, they formed a line from Hanwell to Coombe and Malden. All night through, their destructive tubes advanced. Never once, after the Martian at St. George's Hill was brought down, did they give the artillery the ghost of a chance against them. Wherever there was a possibility of guns being laid for them, unseen, a fresh canister of the black vapour was discharged. And where the guns were openly displayed, the heat ray was brought to bear.
So here we have another structural technique here, starting with wherever there was a possibility of guns being laid for them unseen. And this is what's called parallel structure. And you can refer to it as parallel structure, or you can even refer to it as syntactic parallelism, if you want the technical term. That's syntactic parallelisms. That's SYN, that's N for November, TACTIC. Is that right? Syntactic, I think so. And then parallelism, PARALLELISM. Two L's in the middle there for parallel, of course. And what it does is here, it starts off with whenever there was a possibility of guns, and then where the guns were openly displayed. So it's that word "where" essentially is the key parallel phrase. So where there was guns being unlaid, the gas. Where the guns were displayed, then the heat ray was brought to bear. So the parallelism there of those two phrases, it suggests the depth and the wealth of the Martian invasion. It didn't matter what the obstacle was; they had tools, devices with which to overcome the humans in this case. So it's just a small technique, but if it comes up in the exam, I want you to have that, which is, and I'm sure Mr. Dawson does too, that parallelism there that's used to show how strong the Martians are against humanity.
By midnight, the blazing trees along the slopes of Richmond Park and the glare of Kingston Hill threw their light upon a network of black smoke, blotting out the whole valley of the Thames and extending as far as the eye could reach. And through this, two Martians slowly waded and turned their hissing steam jets this way and that. They were sparing of the heat ray that night, either because they had but a limited supply of material for its production, or because they did not wish to destroy the country, but only to crush and overawe the opposition they had aroused. In the latter aim, they certainly succeeded. Sunday night was the end of the organized opposition to their movements. After that, no body of men would stand against them. So hopeless was the enterprise.
Just a quick point there about the reference to Sunday night. This is a time marker, and throughout the whole novel we have these time markers, these references to time and day over the course of this weekend when this happens, this mid-June or early June weekend. All those years ago, and it gives a real sense of time scale here. So this is again adding to the realism and the chronology of the novel by giving us those time markers. Sunday night was the end of the organised opposition. That suggests this is a new chapter, a new wave of occurrences. It suggests that a new time is happening after Sunday that changes the way in which the Martians interact with the humanity.
Even the crews of the torpedo boats and destroyers that had brought their quick-firers up the Thames refused to stop, mutinied, and went down again. The only offensive operation men ventured upon after that night was the preparation of mines and pitfalls. And even in that, their energies were frantic and spasmodic. One has to imagine, as well as one may, the fate of those batteries towards Esher, waiting so tensely in the twilight. Survivors there were none.
So this is an interesting technique, a very old rhetorical technique, and it's called hyperbaton. Now that's spelt H-Y-P for Papa, E-R-B for Bravo, A-T-O-N. So like a baton that you might twirl a baton, you might pass the baton in a relay race. It's a hyper baton. It's a hyperbaton. Not Surbiton, which is nearby where the novel's set in Surrey, but hyperbaton. And what it does is it reverses the word order. Think of Yoda in the Star Wars films, reverses the word order here. Now we would expect to see there were no survivors, but here we have survivors, there were none. And what that does is it puts the emphasis on the word survivors and the word none by putting them at the beginning and the end of the clause. The hyperbaton heightens the emphasis there on survivors and none, and it makes it all the more dramatic, which of course at this point in the novel we know it's structurally pivotal, and there's a sense here that the Martians really have the upper hand.
One may picture the orderly expectation, the officers alert and watchful, the gunners ready, the ammunition piled to hand, the limber gunners with their horses and wagons, the groups of civilian spectators standing as near as they were permitted, the evening stillness, the ambulances, the hospital tents with the burnt and wounded from Weybridge, then the dull resonance of the shots the Martians fired, and the clumsy projectile whirling over the trees and houses and smashing amid the neighboring fields. One may picture, too, the sudden shifting of the attention, the swiftly spreading coils and bellyings of that blackness advancing headlong, towering heavenward, turning the twilight to a palpable darkness, a strange and horrible antagonist of vapor, striding upon its victims, men and horses near it seen dimly, running, shrieking, falling headlong, shouts of dismay, the guns suddenly abandoned, men choking, writhing on the ground, and the swift broadening out of the opaque cone of smoke. And then night and extinction. Nothing but a silent mass of impenetrable vapor, hiding its dead. Before dawn, the black vapor was pouring through the streets of Richmond, and the disintegrating organism of government was, with a last expiring effort, rousing the population of London to the necessity of flight. So, just to recap on that last page, on page 91 there. So,
We've got the asyndetic lists there of the officers waiting at Esher, the limber gunners with their horses and wagons, the groups of civilian spectators. Sorry, excuse me. I'm getting over the coronavirus, but it's still a bit of a persistent cough there. The groups of civilian spectators standing as near as they were permitted. The evening stillness, the ambulances and hospital tents with the burned and wounded from Weybridge, and then the dull resonance of the shots the Martians fired, and the clumsy projectile whirling over the trees and houses and smashing amid the neighbouring fields. So what you have there, of course, is the asyndeton of the mayhem, the chaos that would ensue in Esher as a result of the Martian advance. And then we have in the next paragraph, one may picture too the sudden shifting of the attention, the swiftly spreading coils and bellyings of that blackness. This is the black smoke that is being described in metaphorical terms, the bellyings of that blackness. So it's an interesting metaphor to use there. I guess personifying it to an extent with that word bellyings, sort of the way it ripples and moves like a belly, I suppose. Makes one think of jelly, doesn't it? Jelly belly. Anyway, strange and horrible antagonist, Hendiadys there, isn't there? While we're at it, the strange and horrible antagonist of vapour striding upon its victims. So there's Hendiadys there, striding upon its victims is more personification, striding upon its victims. Men and horses near it seen dimly running, shrieking, falling. This is more asyndeton there, asyndetic list of the chaos. Choking and writhing, more Hendiadys there to an extent, with choking and writhing, and nothing but a silent mass of impenetrable vapour hiding its dead. So there's nothing particularly about that, but it just is a climactic end to the chapter. We thought at one point there was some hope, some optimism, and here we have a clear sense of the Martian advantage at this time. Before dawn, the black vapour was pouring through the streets of Richmond. Again, that's a metaphor because vapour doesn't really pour; it's a gas. So the metaphor there, and then we have the disintegrating organism of government, rising the population of London to the necessity of flight. This is narrative progression at this point. This is a real sense of forward motion. The fact that London needs to evacuate, it's a really crucial point in the book. So structurally, you've got a really climactic point. It's the central point in the book, both thematically and also physically, structurally. It's central to the book at this point. And that's really it for chapter 15. I hope this has been useful for you. I hope you stay safe. I hope you stay at home. I hope you save the NHS. And I hope you read the book. I hope you make notes in the book. And I hope you save this podcast for next year's revision, when this will be absolutely critical and a real tonic to you at this time, because when you're in year 11, you'll listen to this and it'll be quite something. So that's it for now. Interestingly, I'm not the only prime minister to love this book. Winston Churchill famously was a big fan of science fiction, although not publicly, but he was a big fan of this book in particular, and he actually borrowed the phrase "gathering storm" for one of his famous speeches from this book. So it has a good pedigree of ministerial support, even though actually the book is quite socialist in its message, which I'm sure Mr. Dawson will come on to you with when you look at an Inspector Calls in year 11, where indeed H.G. Wells is referenced as one of the socialist cranks. But for now, I hope you're well. I hope you look after yourselves, and I'll leave it there. Whether I come back again for another episode, I'm not sure. I may need to go and teach year 2 some phonics in my outreach work from here, from Chequers. But for now, I wish you all the best, and good luck in the exam when it happens next year, because you, unlike the current layabouts, you actually will have to sit your exam. Okay, bye for now.